I think the planner was asked to present this because I will try and be as objective as possible. Actually, no, I'm not going to be objective. I'll tell you my point of view too. But I guess what I'll try and do is define the state of British copywriting, because that's what we've been tasked to do. And I'll be honest, when I first read this, I was depressed because you're pissed off. And we'll go through why you're pissed off. But I think what Patrick has alluded to is when we get to the conversation later, my job, my provocation is to work out what are you going to do about it? Because I don't want to work in an environment where you're pissed off, because I work with you guys every day. But before we do that, can I just recap on how I got here? And that's really down to my other job. And my day job is as a planner at an agency called Karmarama, but when I'm not doing that, I'm chairing the DMA Awards, which I hope you guys all enter. Back in 2012, we noticed that there had been quite a drop in the number of entries to the best copywriting category. And I took the leader of the judges, Steve Aldridge, he's here, he works at Engine, to one side, and he said, frankly, Mark, there weren't that many entries, and the entries that we did have weren't that great, and I went through them with him, and he was right. They weren't that good, and I was a bit concerned about that, frankly. Because my formative years were formed in an agency, Ogilvy, and I'll mention David a little bit later, and he comes up quite a few times, where he taught us the value of words. You know, he said, I think, sell or die. Is that right? You were at Ogilvy too. So I've drunk the Kool-Aid. And so the rest of us on the committee took this to heart, and we thought we have to do something about it. We went for lunch in Soho, I guess, that's what you always do. And we decided that we had to launch a campaign, which is, Patrick picked up the narrative, and then we are here today. But over that lunch, I came up with a few of my own thoughts as a planner, so here's my insights, if you like. You've touched on the fact that everybody thinks he or she is a writer. Does everybody think he or she is an art director? Or actually today, can everybody be a developer, I guess? But certainly everybody thinks they're a writer. I actually think social media has led to the bastardization of our language. I mean, as a planner, I spend ages crafting my brief, and I try to make sure that my brief is perfect so that the words I get back from you is as perfect. It only then gives me permission to criticize your work, I think. Do we have any clients in the room? We only have one client in the room, but I too many times hear clients say, you can't say that. Compliance won't let me say that. Is that an excuse? Is it a fair excuse? Are they hiding behind that? And perhaps the most worrying thing I hear is when I'm in a brief and I say, how long have you got to do this? And my writer colleague will say, oh, I've got an hour this afternoon. So if you spend any more than the 48 minutes the project manager has allocated you to write those words, the entire campaign will go over budget. I was brought up by a creative director who told me, and I'm sorry to hop on about the old days because you have done too, as we'll see later in the Census. In the old days, he had a month to write a poster. Does that sound familiar, Patrick? Less than a month, okay. So 48 minutes to write a piece of content sounds a bit harsh to me. Anyway, let's turn to what we've learned. And as I said, we'll tell you who you are, what your life is like, what you think about the craft, and what next. A couple of things have popped out already. I was reading eMarketer, who tell us that 50% of ad spend in the UK is now digital. Apparently we're the first country to cross that 50% spend mark. So has that shift had something to do with the way that we think of writing and you writers? But I think the most important thing that we had to do was to ask you guys, and so let's get into the meat of it. Now, the depressing part we'll come to in detail, don't worry, but there's some very positive notes too. You love the profession, but you fear for the future. You think that we're being overtaken by technology. If I can be a bit of self-help, what came out of all those 433, I think there were, answers to the census, what came out in those answers was that you're angsty, you're self-deprecating, you're frustrated, proud, but you're a very dedicated bunch for sure. More than once, the words clients or morons came out of the survey. But also, you're critical of the systems that exist in agencies that fall over at the touch of a feather, which mean you aren't given enough time to complete the task that you have at hand. I think depressingly for me, you suggest that agencies are in pretty bad shape. And technology comes back into the frame there. You say that both clients and agencies are bamboozled by technology. You're still not quite sure how to utilize technology. So, is it a bad time to be a copywriter? I think in summary, it's okay. It's just a bit shit, frankly, at the moment. So some of the plenary stuff, if I was doing the background to a brief, I'd tell you about your target audience. So here you are. You come in all shapes, sizes, and ages. We found 43 different job titles. You're writers. How many ways can you describe a writer? But there are 43 types of them. As Patrick said, a lot of men in the room. Statistically, 58% of you are males, 40% are female. 2% didn't tell us. 40% of you do refer to yourself as copywriters, 34% as creative. A minority said you were content writers. I want to pause there. What's a content writer? In my point of view, you're all writers. Why do you have to define the kind of writer you are? Are you not devaluing one? Is a content writer less able or more able than a writer? Tell me about that one later. Where do you work? Well, the majority of you still work in agencies. 56% work in an agency. A quarter of you are freelance, 27% to be precise. Do you think, these are questions for us to answer later, do you think that we will see an increase in the number of writers who work inside a brand? At the moment, I think it says there are 10% there who are working inside a brand. So as brands want to get closer to their customers, creating their own content, do you think that more of you will be working client side and agency side? Is that something that's going to change going forward? And as a result, will the whole role of writer change? Moving on, you generally live in London. In terms of demographic, it's still not that much of a young profession. Only 9% of you are aged 18 to 24. The vast majority, 82%, are 25 to 54. And the numbers trail off as you go up the age range. In fact, only 5% are aged over 55. Okay. No, you're in your 40s, I know, aren't you? Yeah. 62% of you have a minimum of 6 years of copywriting experience. And at the other end, a quarter of you have had only 2 or 3 years experience. So you're neither the Mad Men nor the Mavens. I think you're somewhere in the middle. Okay, the most worrying bit of the research is this. And I want to spell this out so we can understand it. 29% of you said you are happy with only half of the work that you do. 20% of you said only 1 in 10 of the pieces of work that you do, you're happy with. 5% of you like everything that you do. Isn't that terrifying? Terrifying. And surely that's the first thing that we have to address tonight. How do we make more of you happier with your output? When you are happy, what are you writing? You're writing long copy. 39% of you prefer writing long copy stuff. Next down, in terms of the pencils, you'll see press ads. 9% of you like writing press ads. TV scripts, 8% of you. You're pretty ambivalent about blog posts, tweets, infographics, video scripts and emails. They're kind of equal like, dislike. They're not on the chart, but when you read the full census, the most disliked things that you're doing, product reviews, banner ads, research surveys, and search. Now, another question for us to ponder later, is there a theme here? Is it that you dislike doing digital stuff? because, as I say, they're not on the chart, but the ones that you didn't like seem to be broadcast more in digital media. And the ones that you do like, my guess is that you seem to spend more time crafting them, or you're given more time to spend crafting them. Is that a theme there, that because you're allowed the chance to express yourself, then you are happier writing it? Okay, what pisses you off the most? Apparently, it's me. It's my fault. It's the brief. That's the top of your hate list. Now, actually, that's something that, I want tonight to be about action. It's all great for me to stand here and tell you that everything's crap. So we have to do something about it. Immediately, as the chairman of the awards committee, what I can do is I can make sure that in the awards, we specify that we want to see a great brief as part of an award-winning campaign. So that hopefully will raise the importance of the brief. And I'm sure we'll have a checklist of things that we want to do after tonight, but that's one thing I can hold my hand up and say that we can and will do, but I'm sure there's more that the DMA can do. Now here comes the second alarm bell of the evening, because second on your list, well, I guess we knew that by the time we'd got to this part of the presentation, hadn't we? Lack of respect for the art of copywriting. Half of you, more than half of you, said what pisses you off is that you're not respected. And honestly, that worries me too, because I don't want to work with people who don't feel that they're respected. And I'm not just saying this, but I do respect you, partially perhaps because I am a frustrated copywriter there, I've admitted it, and in fact I think all planners are, aren't we? But so we have to do something about the working environment too. And here's my chicken and egg dilemma. Is it that because you're not respected, you're not producing great work? Or are you not producing great work because you're not respected? Let's work that one out later. Not on this chart, but also we asked you about what your workplace was like. You're not really concerned about a creative environment. Sorry, Google. You don't think it's important. So is it worth us spending all that money, all these funky offices that we work in? And another kick for me, apparently down at the bottom of the list, you didn't think a strong proposition. Nobody chose that as one of the things you thought was important as part of creating great work. And I spend days writing those bloody propositions. Okay, another question we asked you was, where do you think, when a client was reducing the budget, they would cut? And I think this is where your lack of respect comes in again. Number one, you said, was copywriters and illustrators. You thought they would both be in the firing line first. Now, by comparison, you thought that art directors were relatively secure, with only 6% of you thinking that they would be given the heave-ho. And who's most secure? Those high-tech developers. 1% of you thought that coders would be given the chop by clients. Now, again, I'm sure this thing will come up. Does this suggest that we are admitting to ourselves that things like the visual elements of our craft are more important than the words? Then we asked you what you want your copy to achieve, and that's pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and almost unanimous. 94% of you said you want your output to generate an emotional response. You also said that you thought sticking to tone was pretty important. Now, apparently, sales aren't that important. Well, 69% of you said that selling was important. And to be fair, of course, not every campaign is about selling. Something that pleased me, 32% of you thought that we needed to get better at writing and grammar. And you say, and I have to take your word on this, only 14% of you thought that acclaim from those around you, from your peers, was important. Okay, well, who are your heroes? I'll go round if you can't read them. It's interesting to note lots of names from the past. David Ogilvy died in 1999. David Abbott sadly died last year. Obviously, neither of them have been active for quite a long time. Tony Brignall, Tim Delaney are in there, both copywriters from the kind of heyday, the 70s and 80s. Now, your superstar is Dave Trott. We would have loved Dave to be here tonight. We invited him. He couldn't come. And he replied via Twitter, fittingly, and he said that he is not a copywriter. He said, "I can't think why copywriters consider me a copywriter. My motto is the best copy is the least copy." And all of that leads me to my third worry, that your heroes or dead, or there's certainly heroes from the past. Why are there no heroes, certainly from the present, and potentially heroes from the future? What do you think that future holds for you? Well, increasingly your guns for hire. In 5 years, 1/3 of you expect to remain where you're working now. About the same think you'll be somewhere else. And 1/4 of you will either work on your own, and the rest of you will either quit or perhaps fittingly retire. How about improving the craft? Well, you said the best way for things to be improved, for you to be more confident, to be more creative and respected, you think that you could learn on the job. And in fact, the 2 top groups, 71% of the total, you would learn by reading. So I guess that's quite fitting too, isn't it? Anyway, as I said, depressing. You're not happy with your work, you're not respected, and your heroes are from a golden past age of advertising. But before I go, a lot of you spent a lot of time writing what I call verbatims, and it would be remiss of me to not pick out some of those verbatims. We obviously created a word cloud of some of those verbatims, so you can see, I mean, the words that came to me were words like rushed, undervalued, dull, average, but it wouldn't be fair if I couldn't pick out some great writing. And these are your words. I don't know whether the person who wrote this is in the room, but he or she said about why be a writer. It beats working in a bank. Vanity. I found my way into this industry by accident, but it's the best type of accident. Because I can resist a pun, because I didn't have to wear a suit, because I enjoy it, because I love the power of words. I like to pretend I'm Don Draper. Obviously. I can't quite believe I'm allowed to do it, because I'm damn good at it, because writing is my favourite thing. Fun and money, it chose me. I had a choice. Copywriting is suffering from the ignorance and illiteracy of marketing people. Many of them can't even write a sentence, spell simple words, or compose a coherent email. Yet they have the power of life or death over copy written by someone who knows how to write and think. It's also suffering from the completely mistaken prejudice that people don't read anymore. Walk down the street and you're likely to collide with someone so transfixed by reading a smartphone they can't even see you. Ride on public transport and most people are reading something. And one more, if I may. The industry has abandoned copywriting. Global guidelines and labyrinthine approval processes mean that lorem ipsum is replaced with a selection of marketing speak buzzwords and brand babble that make even less sense to the reader. There's no attitude, no character, no shape, and no message. It used to be said that advertising was only worth doing if you're doing something worth advertising. The same's true of writing copy. If you've got nothing interesting to say, shut the fuck up. So let me finish on some wise words from David. And he said, if all else fails, I drink half a bottle of rum and play a Handel oratorio on the gramophone. This generally produces an uncontrollable gush of copy. And this is the important bit for everybody in the room. If the client changes the copy, I get angry because I took a lot of trouble writing it. And what I wrote on purpose. Thank you.